Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hilton Barbados Resort. Welcome to the launch of the African Export-Import Bank's CARICOM office. My name is Belle Holder, and I'm delighted to be your master of ceremony this afternoon. So it's fitting then to say Jambo, everybody. Momentarily, we will join Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Amor Motley and His Excellency, Professor Benedict Orama, President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank, and other officials via the live stream at the Trident Insurance Financial Center for the ribbon-cutting ceremony and tour of the new AFREXIMBANK CARICOM office. Please take a look at your screen, ladies and gentlemen. I should let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that you're welcome to sit here in the ballroom and view the proceedings at the Trident Insurance Financial Center, or on the outside in the foyer. You can also view the proceedings there as well, wherever you are comfortable is totally fine, here in the ballroom or on the outside in the foyer. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed the official opening and ribbon cutting from the Trident Insurance Financial Center for the new AFREXIMBANK CARICOM office here in Barbados. We will acknowledge that, please, with a round of applause. Yes, indeed. So, as we await the arrival of the dignitaries from the Trident Insurance Financial Center, I invite you to once again direct your attention to their screens, either here in the ballroom or on the outside in the foyer, and take a look at the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which was held here in Barbados in 2022. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen.
I wish you a warm good morning and a welcome to Barbados.
I come to you this morning to speak of our shared history. It is a history of 5 million people taken from Africa to the Caribbean in chains, but you see, you can bind the hands and feet of men and women, but you cannot bind their hearts.
AFREXIMBANK envisages committing an investment of $700 million in the Caribbean as soon as a regional office is open, building on the $250 million we already have established to support trade between the Caribbean and Africa.
But today is about the future. And we have come here cognizant that even though our peoples have worked together for more than a century in the various Pan-African Congresses, that, as you heard earlier, the political union, though essential, the political cooperation, though essential, is not sufficient for the journey that must be made to reverse the underdevelopment of Africa and the underdevelopment of the Caribbean.
There is honor in reclamation as one people moving towards a single destiny.
But this tells us, for me, that Africa can be in the lead. The Caribbean can also, we can be in the lead when it comes to the technologies, because we don't have legacy systems, and therefore we can really leapfrog.
Might this not be the time for us to review our investment strategies and resurrect former President Lula's call for an investment bank of the South, which is why the signing which we witnessed here this morning was so much a step in the right direction for all of us.
We have an opportunity working collaboratively through the continent and with the Caribbean to boost production together and to enhance and to ensure that we are consuming more of the goods that are produced in our regions rather than being net importers. Let us walk this journey. Let us create the frameworks that will enable the private sector and all our separate investors to build up and get to know each other, build up new relationships, but more importantly, produce for our continent, for these islands, and for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Omar. I think at the African Export-Import Bank, we don't believe that anyone needs convincing. The global manufacturing output is estimated at about $500 billion. Africa's contribution is just under 2% from Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, and Nigeria. And at the same time, we are exporting over 70% of all our commodities and raw materials unprocessed. So it is very natural that we need to contribute, we need to transform, we need to manufacture on the continent for our own economic development.
The strategy of strengthening our African private sector based on 3 pillars. The first is private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women and youth. The second is policy advocacy, and the third is product development. So if we're talking about policy and economic zones, how we can have policies that really promote incentives for investment to be in economic zones.
Why don't we create an instrument where we can finance a number of those microfinance institutions to do precisely what we've been talking about today, because they are filling a gap in supporting micro and small enterprises that no one else is. So I think we've very much along the same path as AFREXIMBANK, and I think, I dare say, the bank is ahead of CARICOM countries in putting this kind of infrastructure together. And that's one of the reasons why we have this tripartite agreement, because we are learning from them on how they've approached this in the past.
From the perspective of foreign investors, also to support the functioning of these specific zones, special zones. But also, I think it's important to stress that there are also workers in these zones. And it's important to incorporate some international labor standards, some generally the corporate responsibility standards, and environmental protection, and especially for the modern frameworks of special economic zones.
So we think that by bringing efficiency to payments, okay, we can actually accelerate trade, accelerate tourism. When people travel, they want to spend, and they want to know that those transactions can be settled.
I just wanted to talk maybe about something concrete that, we actually did, which began to give a sense that, our continents, our countries, our markets are not so far away. When COVID hit, and there was a big conversation about how we get the COVID vaccines to the continent. But as we were doing the work, and as we very clearly and very quickly realized, it was not just Africa that was shut out of the COVID vaccine market. It was all the developing countries, and of course, the island countries as well.
How can we turn this into a win-win situation for both regions? We must also help to provide credible market and trade intelligence and facilitate matchmaking between buyers and sellers. We must tackle reducing tariffs and removing obstructive non-tariff measures, such as high transportation costs, and investing in better port and land freight infrastructure.
Of AFREXIMBANK and the AVAT, of really, again, bringing together what would be our joint needs to the table in negotiating for vaccines. So those were really important lessons.
So one main learning point that we made.
Health does have a big impact on economic development, economic growth, because with the pandemic naturally impacting on our tourism. But what it did also help us to see is that we need to pivot. And fundamentally, if we're going to build resilience, our health system and our biosafety mechanisms have to be very, very strong. But more so than that, it also helps us to deep dive and look at what are the opportunities here.
And all of these challenges that have existed for many, many years, our heads of states and government said we need to respond in a way that will be forward-looking, that will make the African continent globally competitive, that will make the African continent an industrialized continent that creates jobs for young people and that contributes significantly to the global economy and global output.
We do have certain realistic problems to fix. I have never believed that financing has been the problem. We need to do the basic work on which financing follows the opportunity.
So there is several opportunities. It's depending on the Caribbean and on the decision. And we are happy that we are here with AFREXIM. AFREXIM will give the support, will give the finance that can make things happen.
But without a shadow of doubt, infrastructure is a fundamental problem. And you see the impact of infrastructure in terms of our competitiveness when we trade globally. So, for example,
ladies and gentlemen,
as a result of challenging infrastructure on the road network.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the Caribbean heads of government. The arrival of Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, also Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philippe Pierre, Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, and the President and Chairman of Board of Directors of AFREXIMBANK, His Excellency, Professor Benedict Orama. Please remain standing, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome the arrival of Prime Minister Motley. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we say good afternoon and welcome for the arrivals of Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor-Maudsley, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philippe Pierre, Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, and President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of AFREXIMBANK, His Excellency, Professor Benedict Orama. Please remain standing, ladies and gentlemen, for the playing of the AFREXIMBANK anthem, followed by the Barbados National Anthem.
Of the motherland and far beyond, with dignity we rise and we build up reach for all, with integrity
and gentlemen, please allow our heads of government and president of the bank to be seated first. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Thank you. Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the opening of the AFREXIMBANK here in Barbados. My name is Belle Holder. I'll be your master of ceremony this afternoon. I take this opportunity to say good afternoon and welcome to the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados. Welcome to Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. To the Honorable Philip Pierre, Prime Minister of St. Lucia. The Honorable Dickon Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, Professor Benedict Oke-Orama, President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank. Good afternoon and welcome to His Excellency, Mr. Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The Deputy Prime Minister, Attorney General, senior ministers, and honorable members of the Cabinet of Barbados, good afternoon and welcome. To the Honorable Denise Charles, Minister for Tourism, International Transport, and Maritime Initiatives of Dominica. The Honorable Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of Nigeria. The Head of Delegation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Ambassadors and senior diplomatic representatives. Good afternoon and welcome to Mr. Dennis Denya, Executive Vice President of AFREXIMBANK. Mrs. Kamayo Awani, Executive Vice President of AFREXIMBANK. To Mr. Rodinal Sumer, CEO of CARICOM Development Fund. The representative of the CARICOM Secretariat, Mr. Leo Priville, Director of CARICOM Single Market. Directors and staff of the African Export-Import Bank. Mr. John Williams, Chairman of Invest Barbados. Ms. Kay Ann Greenidge, Chief Executive Officer of Invest Barbados. To the staff of Invest Barbados, welcome. To Mr. Mark St. Hill, Chief Executive Officer of Export Barbados. Head of the Public Service of Barbados, permanent secretaries, and other senior government officials, good afternoon and welcome to you all. To the staff of the Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc., members of the Rwandan delegation, visiting business executives, local business executives, specially invited guests, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome once again. There is a buzz in the room. Can you feel it? That positive energy when we have the opportunity to connect with our brothers and sisters across the diaspora is absolutely wonderful. Welcome once again to the launch of the CARICOM office of the African Export-Import Bank. May we have a rousing round of applause for what is taking place in Barbados today as history is being made. What's interesting sometimes is the preconceived notions we have about our brothers and sisters across the diaspora. I wanted to know what's the best way to say welcome? And I thought, Jambo? And then I had a conversation on the outside with one of my brothers from Ghana who said, what does that mean, Belle? And then I had a conversation with a sister from Cameroon who said, I don't know what that means. And then I spoke to someone from Rwanda who also did not know what that meant. And I said, I started to ask, so how many languages do you speak? And they started to list off 7+ languages. And at the end of these conversations, I realized that all I need to say this afternoon is hello and welcome everybody to the launch of the African Export-Import Bank. That's it. I am so pleased to welcome you here this evening as we celebrate the coming to fruition of another of the AFREXIMBANK's tangible commitments to the Caribbean. To date, 11 CARICOM member states have signed on to the partnership agreement with the AFREXIMBANK. This office that opened today in Bridgetown, Barbados, will support the implementation of that partnership agreement, which is aimed at expanding African-Caribbean trade and investment relations. Today, we are joined virtually by African and Caribbean nationals across both regions as we celebrate this momentous occasion. Before we get into the formal aspect of the program, I invite Barbadian poet Akeem Chandler Prescott to the stage to perform for us all. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Akeem a warm welcome. Akeem?
We were children of Mama Africa before we became warriors of the state. An orphan fostered in a home made of mud and clay, we played in huts of hushed whispers. Our tongues too heavy to lift each other's spirits. Our backs too broad to broaden our perspectives. We were an instrument of labor, a low note in history, a symphony of misery conducted for over 300 years. We were the greatest band to play and never get paid. Every Negro spiritual was a quiet masterpiece, ensuring that we never disturb master's peace. We had mastery over masking massive amounts of trauma, transforming horrors to horticulture. Our blood, sweat, and tears became the fertilizer to nurture our 20th century economies. We were the children of Mother Africa, and we often wondered, does she still see us as her family? Will there be recognition in her eyes after all of this time? Because her rhythms and movements permeate our bloodlines, will she gaze upon John Canoe and remember Igongun? See them as siblings sitting oceans apart. Do our talking drums still speak from the heart? Or does it sound like incoherent gibberish masquerading itself as art? Will the bark of the yellow poetry in Trinidad lash with the same impact? Rain stick fighting, igniting memories of the Hussar people. Will she look at the Dahomey religious practices in Haiti and smile and not see them as evil? Will she look at us as the rest of the world does, or will she see us as equals? When we transitioned from colonies to small island nations, we became a headache for the brains of the operations. They didn't want to answer our probing questions or put to rest the narrative that we awakened. So they washed their hands of the Caribbean basin, embracing a new regime. But this child of Africa was now growing into a teen. And it was interrogating in its upbringing, dusting out the closet of cobwebs spun by Anansi as he crawled in to our history. His venom, not of vengeance, but of trickery. Like how he figured he could fit all the world wisdom in a calabash. Caribbean people look at that fruit and see use. Europeans look at it like they had cataract. For me, I see it as a green casket for a dying tradition, a memento of my mother, miles across the ocean, a floating spider god submerged in our folklore. The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout, and down came an oppressive regime to wash the standards of living out. Caribbean people knew drought and dry mouth before a droplet of independence could ever whet our appetite for a lifestyle that resembles our mother's domain. We knew struggle before we knew structural change, knew devalued currency before we learned to value foreign exchange. Caribbean people been pregnant with problems, experiencing labor pains, birthing people like them and pain. And our mother Africa was pretty much the same. But not today. Today we don't meet as distant relatives. We're well acquainted with the faces and names from our mother's side. Strands of DNA from the Yoruba tribe plaited into every hairstyle we wear. Their hand-me-downs with pride, inheriting Kente and Ankara sewn into our apparel. Barbados is a round barrel of culture in a room used for wine tasting. That's a metaphor about placement and placing of identity. The children of Africa now gather in reunions religiously, not as warriors of the state, but as adults looking to commemorate our unity. Thank you.
Come on, ladies and gentlemen, once again, please, for Akeem. Fantastic indeed. I take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to acknowledge the chairman of Invest Barbados, Dr. Jeremy Nurse, and we're also joined by Central Bank Governor, Dr. Kevin Greenidge. Thank you so much for being here. It is so fantastic that this is taking place, this occasion is taking place during the season of emancipation, also the 50th anniversary of CARICOM, and of course, during the sweetest summer festival Barbados' Crop Over. We're very excited about that. And now, I invite the Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund, Mr. Rodinald Sumer, to deliver the first statement of support. Mr. Sumer has been leading the CARICOM Development Fund since September 2015, and prior to that appointment, he was the head of the Economic Development Policy Unit with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sumer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will indulge me in accepting that the protocol has already been established. On behalf of the CARICOM Development Fund, CDF, I take this opportunity to congratulate the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of AFREXIMBANK, His Excellency Professor Benedict Orama, on his foresight and leadership in bringing to fruition the establishment of AFREXIMBANK in the Caribbean. After decades of much-touted South-South cooperation, we finally have a clear opportunity to make expanded trading relations between Africa and the Caribbean a reality. This is a fitting and timely contribution to the efforts of the Caribbean region and the African continent to seek redress for the legacy of slavery and to transpose that legacy into a vista of rich opportunities for economic, social, and cultural advancement for the benefit of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of our forefathers who had to endure that horrible middle passage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. We also acknowledge the significant role that Honorable Prime Minister Mia Mottley has played in the realization of this paradigm shift. Her preparedness in offering this country to play host to the regional headquarters of AFREXIMBANK is testimony to Prime Minister Mottley's commitment to South-South cooperation and indeed to the expansion of the boundaries of our integration movement. To Pierre Mottley, I say, Medase. I did not, like Bellholder, check any sources outside. This was recommended to me by one of my staff who attended the 30th anniversary annual meeting of the AFREXIMBANK. So I put my full trust in her. And that means thank you, Prime Minister Mottley. The CARICOM Development Fund welcomes AFREXIMBANK to the region at this juncture in our shared history and pledges its full support to making that paradigm shift a success, so that all citizens on both sides of the Atlantic can be justifiably proud. I urge all stakeholders, especially our small and medium-sized enterprises, to embrace the opportunities for expanded trade in goods and services with the African continent and to take advantage of the generous capacity building assistance being offered by AFREXIMBANK to scale up and expand their businesses in order to access these opportunities. As a recently established shareholder of the AFREXIMBANK, the CDF stands in partnership with the bank to assist with its newly minted regional operations. Specifically, we aim to do so by collaborating on transactions and projects that are aligned with the strategic objectives of the Africa-Caribbean Trade Initiative, and by supporting client awareness of the services that will be offered to the Caribbean private sector to enable them to do business with Africa. This partnership and commitment of the CDF support will be affirmed through the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the CDF and AFREXIMBANK during this landmark event. The CDF pledges its fullest support to the Africa-Caribbean Trade Initiative and wishes AFREXIMBANK every success in its regional operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, CEO Sumer. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the chairman of Invest Barbados, did that earlier, and I'll also acknowledge and welcome Pamela Koch Hamilton, the executive director of the International Trade Center. Thank you so much for being here. Our next speaker is His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Mr. Mene was previously Director of the International Trade Law and Investment Law at the Department of Trade and Industry. He was elected to the position of Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat by the 33rd, say that fast 2 times, ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency to the podium to offer his remarks. Wamkele Mene, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Madam Program Director. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mayor Motley, our host, the Right Honorable Prime Ministers that are here from various countries of the Caribbean, Your Excellency President Obasanjo, former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, my senior brother, Professor Orama, senior executives of the bank, AFREXIMBANK management. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here with you today on behalf of the African Union, and certainly on my behalf. We were here last year in September for the inaugural session of Africa-Caribbean Investment Forum, Trade and Investment Forum. And as an outcome of that event, Professor Orama made a pledge and a commitment that AFREXIMBANK would open an office in the Caribbean. That was in September last year. And so here we are today, marking the opening of this office, taking a very concrete and historic step towards formalization of trade and investment relations between Africa and the Caribbean. The AFCFTA offers an opportunity, a very unique opportunity for us, Africans in the diaspora and Africans in Africa, to accelerate trade and investment ties, to create opportunities for our regions, and to enable competitiveness of our regions. I therefore congratulate the government of Barbados, as well as my senior brother, Professor Orama, and his team for the vision and the foresight of opening this office. Last year, Professor Orama said that we have to move beyond, and I agree, we have to move beyond emotional expressions of our ties and take concrete actions in the area of trade and investment. He also said that we should also marry across the regions. And I'm very happy that I already have taken my personal steps towards integration between the Caribbean. I have started integration at home. My wife is from St. Lucia. And so not only is this an important personal event for me, but I think for every African, it is an important step to ensure the integration that we all want to see. The AFCFTA offers the Caribbean, as I said earlier, a very unique opportunity. It is a market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP that is estimated by the year 2050 to be close to 16.2 trillion United States dollars. In addition, as we all know, by the turn of the century, the largest working force in the world will be in the African continent. Therefore, we have to seize these opportunities to dismantle the colonial economic model that exists in Africa and to some extent here in the Caribbean. When I was coming here, the immigration officer at Heathrow said to me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Barbados." Then she asked a very relevant question. She said, "Then what are you doing here?" Why is it that we have no direct connectivity between the African continent and the Caribbean? So that we sustain this colonial economic model by coming to the Caribbean via London or Paris or whichever capital around the world. And so part of the challenge that we have to overcome is dismantling this economic model, leveraging on AFREXIMBANK, the balance sheet of AFREXIMBANK, to make sure that we create our own opportunities as Africa and the Caribbean. I therefore wish to conclude my remarks by once again thanking the government of Barbados, AFREXIMBANK, for opening this office. I very much look forward to intensified trade and investment linkages between Africa and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you to His Excellency Secretary General Mene. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Africa and the Caribbean share a common history. This is one of the reasons that the African Export-Import Bank is committed to promoting and developing trade between Africa and the Caribbean. This goal is in keeping with the bank's diaspora strategy and the African Union's designation of the African diaspora as Africa's sixth region. To gain more insight into how the relationship between the AFREXIMBANK and the Caribbean has blossomed, please turn your attention to the screen to view the video, AFREXIMBANK, The Journey to the Caribbean. Take a look.
It all began in 1619. When the first Portuguese slave ship, the São João Bautista, docked on the shores of present-day Luanda in Angola. And the pillars of diverse African economies were stolen away, bound in chains, and taken to strange lands. A tiny scar on the hip of Africa was to metastasize into a continental cancer. Our trade in gold, ornaments, spices, and agricultural commodities was replaced with trade in our people. The agents of Africa's development became instead the engines for agricultural and industrial revolutions elsewhere. But despite the tragedy, we always hoped for the return of our people. We hoped for the restoration of African dignity. We hoped for the total emancipation of all Africans. We knew that to free ourselves, we must first free our minds. And this thirst for freedom, this quest for reunification, gave us the energy and armor to confront colonialism. through relentless sacrifice, the battle was finally won in and around the 1960s. One by one, African countries cast off colonial domination to become independent states. The reunification journey began. The birth of AFREXIMBANK in 1993 to transform Africa's trade. The declaration of the diaspora as Africa's 6th region in 2016. The historic declaration of the Year of Return by the government of Ghana in 2019. And heritage restitution, all combined to become the unassailable force powering the emergence of a new Middle Passage. Emergent, a new Africa stretching beyond geographic boundaries to the Caribbean and beyond, to become the Afri-Caribbean continent. Powered by AFREXIMBANK's diaspora strategy, new Middle Passages are emerging, built on trade in goods and services, investment and economic opportunities. This reunion has been celebrated far and wide. In December 2020, the historic first direct flight carrying Nigerian government officials, businessmen and tourists flew from Lagos to Sangster International in Jamaica. And in September 2021, the African Union and CARICOM held the first Africa CARICOM Summit under the theme Unity Across Continents and Oceans, Opportunities for Deepening Integration. That momentous occasion was followed by the celebration of the Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, with the convergence of over 1,000 African and Caribbean business people, policymakers, and governments in Barbados to nurture new trade, investment, and economic ties. Forging ahead with a common purpose for shared prosperity, the two regions have determined never to look back. AFREXIMBANK offers the bond that binds them together, with a partnership agreement now in place that makes CARICOM states, members of the bank, benefiting from its development programs. Barbados was the first CARICOM country to sign up to the agreement, with an additional 10 countries signing at or following the inaugural Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum in 2022. The bank was invited to the 44th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, which was held in the Bahamas in February 2023, with Professor Orama making history as the first head of an African institution to address the CARICOM heads of government. Caribbean heads of state were also prominent at the first gathering of Global Africa at the recent AFREXIMBANK annual meetings, where the Honourable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, and the Honourable Philip Davis, Prime Minister of the Bahamas, and then Chairman of CARICOM, each delivered a keynote address. And the Honourable Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, featured as a panelist. AFREXIMBANK is opening its CARICOM office in Barbados and has approved an initial $1.5 billion limit for the region, expected to rise to $3 billion, catalyzing new investments in trade, tourism, and industrial infrastructure in the region. Many major African companies today are already successfully doing business across the CARICOM region or are engaged to commence in the near term. And this year, the second Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, Active 2023, comes to Guyana. A new Middle Passage has truly emerged, bustling with shared opportunities for growth and prosperity. In the celebration and support of this, after 400 years of the arrival of the Sao João Bautista, and in accord with the Oseg Yefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we say, never again. Forward ever, backwards never.
Forward ever, backward never. That is look journey, the AFREXIMBANK, the journey to the Caribbean. It is now my pleasure to introduce the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of AFREXIMBANK. Professor Benedict Orama is the President and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the African Export-Import Bank. As the President of AFREXIMBANK, Professor Orama has grown the bank significantly and improved its global appeal and relevance to the African continent. The bank has made impressive strides under Dr. Orama's leadership, growing its assets and contingent liabilities by almost sixfold from about US $5 billion at the end of September of 2015 when he assumed office to US $3.1 billion by December 2022. The bank has also diversified its sources of income while achieving impressive global credit ratings and performance metrics. Last year, AFREXIMBANK raised US $13.4 billion in funding to support its business, posted a 36% growth in revenue over 2021, and achieved a shareholder payout ratio of 35%, combining a proven record of paying dividends, revenue diversification, and achieving development impact on the continent. Professor Orama consistently keeps a laser focus on the bank's mission to advance regional integration and industrialization across Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, with those numbers and achievements, let's welcome His Excellency, Professor Orama, to the podium.
Thank you, the Madam of Ceremony, not Master. Excellency, the Honorable Miamu Motley, my dear sister and our host, Prime Minister of Barbados, Excellency, Honorable Prime Ministers here present, who have been the back rock of all the things we have been trying to do here in the Caribbean. Excellency Baba, the Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and our guide in all the work we do in Africa and here in the Caribbean. Excellency, my dear brother, Wankele Mene, the Secretary General of the AFCFTA Secretariat, the dear brother that has got ahead of us in integrating, starting from the family. Sir Rodinald Suma, dear brother, CEO of CARICOM Development Fund, the first CARICOM investor in AFREXIMBANK. We thank you. The Attorney General of Barbados and honorable ministers and heads of governmental institutions, representatives of the governments of the CARICOM who are here, executive vice presidents of the bank and senior officials, our partners, our clients who are making the effort we are making here worthwhile. We thank you for joining us and for making it possible for us to point ahead and say, we will be able to make a difference. It's a special day for all Africans. It may look like a simple ceremony, but I'm told that monumental events are usually started with simple ceremonies, and this appears to me to be one of them. Because today we mark that day when our collective hopes and dreams about reversing the iniquities of the Middle Passage are finally being realized. Today, we begin the process of concretizing our aspirations to make humane trade and investments the vehicle for reuniting brothers and sisters separated by a nefarious and inhumane activity that made others rich on the cracked bones and graves of our people. I feel good today because step by step, we are proving that our destiny is in our hands. We can complain about the evils of the past 400 years. We can wail about the collective loss of dignity. We can bemoan the calamity brought upon us by the callous. But the question had always been, what have you done about it? I dare say that today we are taking one of the most consequential steps towards doing something about it. About 2 years ago to this day, here in Barbados, Prime Minister Motley and I affirmed our determination to leverage our individual strengths towards converting words to action as regards reintegrating the people of Africa and the Caribbean. With the political will unambiguously in place, especially in the context of the declaration of Africa's diaspora as the African Union's 6th region, we agreed that what was needed was action. We developed a memorandum of understanding that had clear deliverables and activity plans. I'm pleased that today we have delivered on all the key aspects of that plan. A key milestone in that journey is the opening of the CARICOM office of AFREXIMBANK, which we complete today. It is historic that the first AFREXIMBANK office outside the geographic Africa is here in the CARICOM, only in Barbados. Permit me to congratulate all CARICOM partner states of the bank, as well as the government and people of Barbados, for this remarkable achievement. There is no doubt that this office will be very busy. During September 2022, we held the first ever Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum here in Bridgetown that attracted over 1,200 people from across Africa and the Caribbean. That formed the basis for trade and investment missions that followed, and we generated over $2 billion in investment interest from African investors interested in investing in the CARICOM. On that basis, our AFREXIMBANK board approved an initial amount of $1.5 billion to support the financing of eligible transactions in the CARICOM. The financing envelope was made possible due to the rapid sign-up of CARICOM economies to the partnership treaty negotiated with our AFREXIMBANK. As at date, 11 countries have signed and 8 countries have ratified the agreement, opening up all these countries to our AFREXIMBANK interventions. I thank the prime ministers who are here and others who are not here but who have signed this agreement for making it possible for us to be here today. Projects well advanced or in discussions in the CARICOM include the development of solar and geothermal energy plants in St. Kitts and Nevis, amounting to $100 million by SWD Electric. The expansion of some ports in Barbados by Orascom Construction, working with Barbados Ports Authority. The total project cost estimated at about $100 million. The development of a maintenance, repair, and operations facility in Antigua and Barbuda to support CARICOM aviation industries by Arise Integrated Industrial Platform, an investee company of AFREXIMBANK. The development of fish farming and integrated aquaculture facilities across several Caribbean countries by Evergreen Egypt United, with a total estimated cost of about $120 million. These are just a few examples of the many impactful projects that are underway or in the pipeline. Also in the pipeline, we have several transactions across tourism and hospitality, creative industry, financial services, energy, agribusiness, infrastructure, shipping and cruises, airlines, and many others. I'm very pleased that we will soon be able to prove to doubting Thomases that the sky is the limit if brothers and sisters come together to challenge themselves. Let me also take this opportunity to say that we have some of the investors associated with these projects present here today to witness this historic event. These companies are making history as the pioneers of the Great Trek that will see the institutionalization of a firm commercial bridge between Africa and the Caribbean. Your presence is recognized and appreciated. I salute your commitment to a shared vision. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we open our offices here, we remain mindful that the new global financial architecture can only work for us if we build and strengthen our own regional financial architecture. That is why we are also working with the CARICOM Secretariat to set up a Caribbean Exim Bank, as endorsed by the 44th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community in February 2023. We're also pleased that the Association of Caribbean Central Banks has made a decision to run the pilot of a regional payment platform with the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. If they do adopt PAPS, then payments across the two regions will be seamless, making trade, tourism, and investments easier. We look forward to that day when Barbados can buy Ivorian cocoa, paying for it in Bajan dollars. To that day when a young couple in Kenya can enjoy honeymoon in the Bahamas, paying in Kenyan shillings. The day is not too far off. With the launch of the CARICOM office, we look forward to a smooth implementation of these initiatives, broader business origination across the CARICOM, and more impactful results from our partnership. I assure you that this is just the beginning. As soon as other CARICOM countries enter the partnership agreement, the limit available to the region will double to $3 billion. We also look forward to our AFREXIMBANK subsidiaries finding homes in the CARICOM, especially the Fund for Export Development in Africa, FEDA, which is the Impact Equity Fund subsidiary of our AFREXIMBANK. Also, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System and the AFREXINSURE, the insurance subsidiary of our AFREXIMBANK. Over time, CARICOM and African financial systems will become better integrated for the benefit of our people. And in the beautiful 2-hectare piece of land the government of Barbados has proposed to make available to our AFREXIMBANK, we look forward to standing up the Africa Trade Center, an iconic building that will house offices, a hotel, an exhibition facility, trade information center, and a technology hub. As we open this new chapter in our history, we turn our minds from the memories of the devastating effects of the slave trade to the imperative of developing a mutual and beneficial relationship for a shared prosperity underpinned by trade in goods and services. And in the new dispensation, we must remember the words of Marcus Garvey, who said, and I quote, "Take advantage of every opportunity. Where there is none, make it for yourself." Allow me now to thank all the dignitaries gathered here to witness this occasion. In particular, special thanks to the Prime Ministers from the CARICOM who have once again demonstrated their commitment to a stronger Africa-CARICOM integration by joining us in solidarity today. Thank you, Prime Ministers. Special thanks to His Excellency President Obasanjo for his steadfast support to the bank and being here as a vote of confidence for this initiative. Thanks, Baba. Permit me to also thank His Excellency Wankele Mene and Her Excellency Pamela Cook-Hamilton of the LCOT Secretariat and ITC, respectively, for their unshakable support for this journey. And thank you for being very, very excellent brothers and sisters. And to the CARICOM Development Fund, we say thank you for joining us, combining your knowledge of the CARICOM region and your passion for the work we are doing. We make it possible for the goals we set for ourselves to be achieved very quickly. We thank you. And to all African and Caribbean people gathered here, I say many thanks. We are the platform on which Afro-Caribbean trade and investment will rest. Let me take this opportunity to applaud the government of Barbados under the leadership of our sister, Her Excellency Maya Amomotli, who have not only graciously agreed to host the CARICOM office, but for also leading the way in enhancing the Caribbean-African trade. Not only did Barbados host the hugely successful first Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which I spoke about earlier, but it was the first country to sign and ratify the partnership agreement, granting the bank all the privileges and immunities to operate here in Barbados, and making it possible for us to gain time in opening this office. Thank you, my sister. And today, they've committed their land and their people to host the AFREXIMBANK CARICOM office. We are humbled and extremely grateful for this gesture of faith that you have placed in the bank for the development of our two regions and for reversing the evils of the Middle Passage. We continue on that great path of shaping our own destiny as we host the second Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum scheduled for the 30th to 31st October 2023 in Georgetown, Guyana. We would therefore like to invite everyone present here to that exciting forum that we hold later this year. It is by attending these meetings and forum that we continue to build a network that will make it possible for us to expand our trade and investment. So you are all invited. In 2018, AFREXIMBANK worked in partnership with the African Union Commission and the AFCFTA Secretariat to introduce biennial intra-African trade fairs. AFREXIMBANK pre-funds the organization of the trade fairs, of which the last two were held in Cairo, Egypt, and Durban, South Africa, respectively. The two fairs attracted an aggregate of about 40,000 visitors and about $75 billion in deals that were closed. With the AFCFTA Secretariat joining the partnership, we've now branded that trade fair the AFCFTA Marketplace. The journey we've all embarked on, the journey to reintegrate Africa and the Caribbean, can only be realized when we begin to break down the information barriers that exist. The Inter-African Trade Fair provides the opportunity for us to break down that barrier. The next trade fair will be held in Cairo, Egypt, from the 9th to the 15th of November 2023. And for the first time in the history of the trade fair, we are introducing a Diaspora Day, inspired by the strong bond and the mutually beneficial future we are creating together here. The Diaspora Day will encompass a Diaspora Summit, a D Room, a gastronomic showcase, and live performances from diasporic artists. We look forward to your participation and support, knowing that it cannot be Diaspora Day without the presence of our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean. As I close, I urge all of us to not relent as we soldier on with this fruitful and meaningful engagement. We've started the journey. It will not be easy, but there's no going back. Kwame Nkrumah said, "Forward ever, backward never." For AFREXIMBANK, we have our hands on the plow. We will not look back. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Orama. Thank you, sir, for your vision for strengthening the partnership between Africa and the Caribbean, and by extension, AFREXIMBANK and the Caribbean. We certainly look forward to the relationship between the Caribbean and the bank growing and bringing benefits to both regions. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Orama. This evening, we are so lucky to have joining us 3 visiting heads of government from CARICOM member states. At this time, I would like to introduce the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Philippe Pierre. Prime Minister Pierre is a dedicated politician and a committed district representative with over 30 years of experience in government and opposition. He has held many portfolios over the years, including, of course, Deputy Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, from St. Lucia, Helen of the West, please help me welcome Prime Minister the Honorable Philippe Pierre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ceremonies. I would like to welcome you with an African saying, but since I'm from St. Lucia, I'll say Sakafet. Let me recognize colleague heads of government, Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Prime Minister of Grenada, Excellency President of the AFREXIMBANK, former President of Nigeria, members of the Cabinet of Barbados, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. 3 days ago, that is on Tuesday, 1st August, the people and governments of the member states of CARICOM observed Emancipation Day, a celebration of the freedom which enslaved African people in this chain of islands in the Caribbean Sea gained on 1st August 1838 from the British masters after 300 years. Emancipation on 1st August 1838 effectively brought to an end to a trade which forcibly brought our ancestors from Africa to work as slaves on the plantations in the then British Caribbean. It is therefore of no little historical significance that the launching of the CARICOM office in the AFREXIMBANK takes place today, soon after these celebrations. In fact, in St. Lucia, emancipation activities are held throughout the month of August, and so this ceremony still fits in with our Emancipation Day observations. The launching of this office is therefore a reversal of the unjust and inhumane links that was forcibly set up between the Caribbean and Africa by Europeans 400 years ago. And it establishes the foundation for free, meaningful, and dignified relationships between CARICOM and African countries. This ceremony today also validates and pays homage to the many Caribbean men and women who over the centuries have sought to reestablish the proper bonds between the Caribbean and our African homeland. As far back as the late 18th century, the Haitian revolutionary leader, Toussaint Louverture, had conceived the idea of sending thousands of his best troops to Africa in order to put an end to the slave trade, and had allocated the financial resources to do so. In the 1940s, in London, George Padmore and C.L.R. James of Trinidad and Tobago, Amy Ashwood, Marcus Garvey of Jamaica, joined the future African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana to agitate for African liberation. When Ghana became independent, Padmore was to become Nkrumah's advisor for African affairs, while St. Lucia's Arthur Lewis was his economic advisor. Another St. Lucian, Sir Danny Alexander, became the Chief Justice of Nigeria in 1975. Since that era, the ties between CARICOM countries and Africa have become minimal, and in the area of trade, there was practically nothing to write about. The partnership agreement between CARICOM and the AFREXIMBANK is an opportunity to transform this, to lay to rest the ghosts of the Atlantic slave trade, and to usher in a new era for CARICOM in Africa. The economic sectors that have been identified for the bank's activities are critical for the development of the CARICOM economies, and will therefore give Africa a vital role in our economic futures. I'm particularly pleased with the proposed support for small and medium-sized enterprises as one of the priorities, as this is one of the priorities of my government, is to empower micro and small business enterprises to be stronger participants in our economy. What is also significant about the partnership agreement with the bank is that it represents a very good example of South-South cooperation. For decades, we have recognized and spoken about the necessity for South-South trade as we seek to diversify the traditional ties that have characterized our international economic relations here in the Caribbean and also in Africa. The presence of the AFREXIMBANK in the region will give practicality to our words. Only this week, St. Lucia took another step in South-South cooperation with the signing of agreement for a loan for the Saudi Arabian Development Fund for the completion of the reconstruction of the St. Jude Hospital in the south of the island. I therefore look forward to the bank truly fulfilling its role as a bank of the South, for the South, one that understands the peculiar needs of the South, like the threat of climate change, and a bank which responds accordingly with flexibility, speed, and generosity without the onerous strictures of some traditional financial institutions of the North. I also look forward to cooperation between the bank and the CARICOM Economic Fund and the Caribbean Development Bank. This partnership agreement of the bank, which virtually comes to life today with the launching of the office in Barbados, is the signal for us in CARICOM to deepen our relations with Africa. The government of St. Lucia is committed to doing so, and it's our intention to establish a diplomatic presence in some African countries. With the bank operating in the region for all CARICOM countries, it's perhaps time for CARICOM countries to establish joint missions in Africa rather than the individual diplomatic offices that some of us have in a few African states. Finally, let me compliment and thank all those who worked assiduously to make the launching of the bank in the Caribbean, in in the CARICOM region a reality. You have accomplished a great service to the people of CARICOM and Africa. And I say a special thank you to Prime Minister Mia Motley and to the President and Chairman of the bank and directors of the AFREXIMBANK, Professor Benedict Omar. In April this year, when the bank announced that its board of directors had approved the opening of the bank's CARICOM office in Barbados, you said then, Professor, we are poised to right the wrongs of the Middle Passage. Today, we are not only poised to right these wrongs, but we have joined hands to open a new passage, a new crossing between African sons and daughters in the Caribbean and their brothers and sisters in Africa, one that can only lead to harmony and prosperity for all. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Philip Pierre, Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I am equally pleased to introduce the next speaker, Prime Minister of Grenada from the Spice Isle. Prime Minister Decon Mitchell is the 9th Prime Minister of Grenada following general elections in June 2022. He is the youngest person to become Prime Minister in Grenada. Prime Minister Mitchell is an attorney at law by profession. In addition to being Prime Minister, he holds the portfolios for finance, national security, home affairs, public administration, information, and disaster management. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Prime Minister Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam of Ceremony. Pleasant good afternoon to distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think I should correct you by saying I'm actually not the youngest Prime Minister to have been the Prime Minister of Grenada. There was a former well-known revolutionary leader by the name of Maurice Bishop, who was, in fact, younger than me by an entire decade when he became the Prime Minister of Grenada. He was only about 33 years old at the time. So subjectively, I may look like the youngest Prime Minister of Grenada. Your Excellency, Honorable Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, and permit me if I say one of the most distinguished leaders, not just of CARICOM, but of the world. Thank you for inviting us and thank you for hosting us today. Colleague Prime Ministers, the great Comrade Ralph Gonzalez. Comrade Gonzalez, in listening to my brother's speech, it looks I may have to disappoint you and seek a bride, not in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but perhaps on the continent of Africa. Prime Minister Philip Pierre from St. Lucia, pleasure to see you again. Your Excellency Chief Obasanjo, former President of the Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Rodinal Suma, CEO of the CARICOM Development Fund, and His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General of AFCITA. Your remarks today was inspiring, and I see you have taken concrete steps to bridge the divide between the diaspora and the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct honor for me to be present this afternoon to make brief remarks. This afternoon, we are witnessing the convergence of two dynamic regions, the continent of Africa and the Caribbean, each blessed with unique strengths and resources. As we stand at this juncture, we cannot overlook or overemphasize rather, the historic moment that we are witnessing today. Centuries ago, our ancestors were bound together through a painful history of transatlantic slavery. But today, we come together with a renewed sense of purpose and unity, ready to forge a new path towards progress and prosperity on our own terms, not on the terms of others. It is therefore my privilege to join my fellow heads of governments and our esteemed colleagues from the African Export-Import Bank and our distinguished brothers and sisters from the continent to commemorate this historic occasion that signifies the strengthening of the ties between Africa and the Caribbean. The establishment of the CARICOM branch office will undoubtedly amplify our collective efforts to harness the vast potential that exists in both regions, opening doors to new avenues of trade, cooperation, and deeper integration of our peoples. We have already identified sectors where we complement each other's strengths in critical development areas such as ICT, agriculture, renewable energy, the creative industries, and education. Our small island developing nations possess a wealth of natural resources and cultural diversity that can meet the demands of the African markets. Similarly, Africa's booming industries offer a plethora of opportunities for Caribbean businesses to expand their global footprint. Through joint initiatives and collaboration, we can drive sustainable growth and job creation, enhancing and deepening South-South cooperation, promoting economic resilience, and reducing our dependence on traditional trade partners. As we move forward, let us remember that this collaboration demands our collective effort and dedication. I therefore call on all of our governments, businesses, citizens, to actively engage with the AFREXIMBANK's CARICOM branch, tapping into the wealth of experience, knowledge, and financial expertise that the institution holds. Having played a pivotal role in facilitating trade and investment across the African continent. Importantly, this collaboration also provides opportunities to foster cultural exchange, people-to-people connections, and mutual understanding. I therefore particularly welcome the announcement of the Diaspora Day homecoming in November. So through dialogue and shared experience, we can deepen our appreciation of each other's cultures and heritage, further strengthening the bonds between Africa and the Caribbean. In concluding, I express my sincere gratitude to the AFREXIMBANK for its commitment to building bridges with us. I express my sincere appreciation for the leadership shown by the Honorable Mia Motley in ensuring that this office became a reality in quick time. Let us collectively seize this opportunity to forge ahead with determination and enthusiasm, knowing that together, Africa and the Caribbean can be stronger. And I end with a phrase that became very, very popular in Grenada under the youngest prime minister that Grenada has ever had. Forward ever. Forward ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Mitchell. And also, thank you for your correction and the acknowledgement of the late Maurice Bishop. And may you continue to showcase the fountain of youth, certainly garnered from the spices of Grenada. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Decon Mitchell. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening we are also joined by the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the jewels of the Caribbean for its beautiful islands. Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez is now in his 5th consecutive term as Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This Caribbean statesman, who is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, first led his party to victory in 2001. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Prime Minister Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, the belle of Barbados and the Caribbean. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the opening of this office of the AFREXIMBANK Bank in the Caribbean is a historic occasion. We have to acknowledge it. We have to see the significance of it. We have to grasp what it means to us as a people in the Caribbean and in Africa. Men and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. Men and women do not make history in circumstances chosen by themselves, but circumstances which have presented themselves and which they have exploited to advance their own interests, their own humanization. And where at the margin those circumstances may not be propitious, leadership ensures that you push the boundaries to make things happen. Last night, P.J. Patterson and Baba emphasized that our shared experiences must be translated into shared expressions. And there are many shared expressions which we can conceive of and which we have engendered and we have developed. But one important shared expression is the AFREXIMBANK. Philippe pointed out that there were circumstances historically in which the relations between Africa and the Caribbean grew and then withered, and they have now sprouted again. And it is our obligation as leaders and people to ensure that in solidarity with each other, that we must push ourselves to our bodies' edges among the unbounded elements. I want to suggest that the Caribbean constitutes an important bridge for Africa and the AFREXIMBANK to expand even further. We have important institutions in Latin America, like, for instance, the Caribbean Latin America Bank, the CAF. And your bank may well find possibilities in establishing strategic relationships with this financial institution, which facilitates investment both of a private sector and public sector kind. I know that up to now there has been not a sufficient understanding about this bank, the office of which has been set up in the Caribbean, a branch office. This bank is not a development bank of the type of the Caribbean Development Bank. That remains our premier bank for development financing. This bank is a commercial bank with developmental dimensions. And I expect that the bulk of the loans issued by this bank would be to the private sector. And I want the private sector to be alive, to be alert to the possibilities of this bank. And that the role of the governments would be to assist in ensuring that the investments which are made by this bank, that the risks attendant upon those investments can be reduced so as to make the particular investment projects of a private sector kind viable. I think that is a very important practical matter that we must bear in mind. This bank also provides the platform for us to be able to link investors from Africa to have an interest in Caribbean investments, both of a private sector and a public sector kind, or joint private sector, public sector. And also for Caribbean investors to do likewise in Africa. I think this is not something which is just glorified. It is something with tremendous practical significance. It's an institution which a current capital, an asset base, of, I listened to my brother Benedict, the head of the bank, when I was in Ghana, and he said $33 billion, the asset base, and that by 2030, he's hoping to have this rise to 60 billion. Well, now that's a huge asset base. And I would not want, I see many private sector personalities here. I wouldn't want you to stand askance from this institution. I would like also to see that though it is here for the Caribbean, for CARICOM, that other Caribbean countries, that links can be made, including Cuba. We must never forget, in the historical evolution of the relations between Africa and the Caribbean, that Cuba has played a very important role in the modern period, in that without Cuban troops, the independence of Angola would not have been assured. And When the South African, the racist army was defeated at the Battle of Cueta Valley by the Cuban and Angolan forces, and Baba will remember that very well. That, as Nelson Mandela told us, is what helped to open his cell door at Robben Island, because the people in South Africa began to see, the middle class people began to see their young sons coming back in body bags, and they realized that things were changing. The technical assistance resources which are available to this bank would also be of value for private sector and public sector entities. Further, the payment system which the Africa Exim Bank is elaborating is very vital in a world where, and Mia pointed to it last night in her presentation, and I don't know how many persons listened very carefully. Countries which control the global financial system use the payment system to demand compliance and obedience to a range of policies not within our interests. And increasingly, we notice that the United States of America and Europe, following the United States, President Macron used the formulation that they have to be careful not to be vassals. I'm not using that formulation. I'm just quoting President Macron. That they decide, if they don't like a particular government or its policies, to impose financial sanctions on you, as they have done in the case of Venezuela in a very hypocritical manner. But this Africa Exim Bank, in devising a particular kind of payment system with the base and the volume, that it is possible for it to establish parallel payment systems, if not alternative, in order to facilitate countries in the pursuit of development in their own interests. I am pointing out to the private sector the critical importance of what we are engaged in here today. I didn't sign on to AFREXIMBANK Bank purely for emotional reasons. It was a hard-headed decision. You know, a lot of people don't think that those who talk about justice and solidarity can count, can do arithmetic. But in order for us practically to effect justice and solidarity and the lifting of our people, we have to be able to count. We have to be able to do arithmetic. And this bank is a practical matter of arithmetic to help us with resources in developing and strengthening our private sector, and for projects involving the state too, but very critically the private sector, to develop our country, our respective countries, within our own interests. I am happy that this bank is here. believe it will expand opportunities. Some of the commercial banks in our region, which are often shy of certain investments, may well find that this bank may have an appetite for some kinds of investments which some of the ordinary commercial banks may not be interested in. It's not that. It's a bank, you know. You borrow the money, you got to pay it back. It's not a charitable institution. But if it has a philosophy which is of a somewhat different nature, that you are likely to see more beneficial results in particular areas of investment. So St. Vincent and the Grenadines is very much in support, and we're looking forward to this bank acting directly with investors in our country to help with the prosperity, the growing prosperity, and to help to improve the lives and livelihoods of ordinary people, which is what we are about. As a man who has been in the jungle for a very long time, I develop jungle instincts. And all my jungle instincts tell me that AFREXIMBANK is good for the Caribbean, and we have to support it. Thank you very much.
You don't get to 5 terms by being afraid of the jungle. Thank you, sir. Prime Minister Gonzalez of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Please give him another round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome our next speaker. He is His Excellency Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of Nigeria. Chief Obasanjo is a Nigerian retired Army general and statesman who served as Nigeria's head of state from 1976 to 1979, and later as President of Nigeria from 1999 to 2007. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Chief Obasanjo.
My dear sister, thank you very much for that short and beautiful introduction. But I'll just tell you that when I was president of Nigeria and the members of opposition who will want me to be seen as a dictator, they normally introduced me as general. And the members of my party who want to see me and project me as a Democrat, we either address me as President Obasanjo or Chief Obasanjo. I don't know which one you have chosen. My dear sister, once again, I thank you. You see, in my part of the world, when you have somebody doing well, and we say, I congratulate you, and I congratulate myself, which means we are sharing what you are doing. And on this occasion, I congratulate you and all my brothers, honorable prime ministers, and as Professor Benedict Rama said, this is a great day for all of us. I never, in my wildest dream, that I will witness a day like this. A day where AFREXIMBANK, which was designed as a bank to promote trade and interaction within Africa, will move its activity beyond Africa and bring it to CARICOM, where we in the AU believe strongly that the CARICOM should be the 6th region of Africa. And now you have concretized that even better than we imagined by bringing AFREXIMBANK here. Then, not only have you brought AFREXIMBANK here, you are actually making, I put it this way, using the Atlantic, which was a dreadful water for 400 years ago, and until the emancipation, you are now making that same water, that same Atlantic, a bridge to join and bring together Africa and the Caribbean. Together, as I said last night, we can achieve a lot. And that is what you are doing here. For me, this is a red letter day for us all. On the continent and in the diaspora. And I believe that this will go a long way. And you, President Orama, you have made the decade, have been, of course, been almost a part of AFREXIMBANK. You have made the decade of your tenure a golden decade for AFREXIMBANK. The Intra-African Trade Fair, the expansion that you have carried out in the equity and outreach in all areas of infrastructure and intra-Africa trade and export. And now bringing Africa to the Caribbean and Caribbean to Africa by the office you have opened here. I think we cannot thank you enough. I want to thank my sister, with whom you have been collaborators. You have collaborated. And that is also a lesson for us. We are strong when we work together. We can achieve when we work together. And that is what you have shown here. I look forward to the Africa Trade Center, which you will develop from the land that has been given to you in such a way that that center will become a center to really bring Africa more to the Caribbean than it has ever been done in the past. I thank you, and I am very happy that I'm able to see this day before I board the plane. Don't laugh. When you look at the Prime Minister of Grenada, you said the youngest. And of course, the Prime Minister corrected you. When you look at me, you may think that I'm a young man. Ralph, at the age of 86, and that's official. I will be deceiving myself if I call myself a young man. I want to thank you and say, like the Prime Minister of St. Vincent said, this, the AFREXIMBANK, is essentially to be used by the private sector. Of course, it does not exclude the public sector. But what is important is that we make maximum use and get maximum advantage out of it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Obasanjo. Another round of applause, please. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker this evening certainly needs no introduction, but permit me to acknowledge that she is the 8th and first Prime Minister of Barbados, and when she came to office on May 25th, 2018. She was first elected to the Parliament of Barbados in September 1994 as part of the new Barbados Labour Party government. Prior to that, she served as one of 2 opposition senators between 1991 and 1994. Upon being elected, she served as Minister of Education, Youth Affairs, and Culture from 1994 to 2001. She has also served as Attorney General and Deputy Prime Minister of Barbados from 2001 to 2008. She was also the first female to serve as Attorney General in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and acknowledge, because this is her house, not welcome, acknowledge the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley.
Thank you very much, Belle, and thank you with your conspiracy, like me, to dress as though this is crop over weekend. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests all, in particular, allow me to single out Baba, the former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It is a distinguished honor of all of us in Barbados to be able to host you and for you to have come for this emancipation season. My three brothers of CARICOM, Ralph, who PJ appropriately dubbed last night as the Dean of Caribbean Prime Ministers, and Philip and Decon, who I think it is fair to say that even if Barbados has not formally recognized its union with the OECS, it has always been that sister of the OECS, closer than ever. And the freshness that both of you have brought to the regional conversation with respect to the many myriad challenges that we face at this time in our independence movement is heartening, because it allows us to appreciate how best we can continue to work together. Our representatives from Dominica, Minister of Tourism from Dominica, and Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office from St. Kitts and Nevis. I know that both of your Prime Ministers wanted to be here, but we thank them for allowing you, both ladies, to be present to represent both countries. And of course, the man of the hour, Professor Orama, and all of the rest of your team. We're largely here because of your vision, and because your vision matched our vision. In 2018, when we became the government, we indicated that we wanted to reclaim our Atlantic destiny. And many thought that this was just a buzz phrase. What does reclaiming our Atlantic destiny mean? Well, you now know today what it has meant for us. That for all of our independent life, our dealings focused on the North Atlantic countries. Everything went north. And we determined that as we move, depending on which country in the region you're looking at, in the first or second generation of independence, that we were certainly old enough, with enough gray hair, to be able to say for ourselves with whom we should want to relate, trade, invest, and be among. And as a result of that, from 2019, a series of events started to happen. I want to thank Ambassador Liz Thompson, who played a critical role in helping forge this relationship when she was our permanent rep at the United Nations, and ensured that both the presidents of Ghana and Kenya were able to visit Barbados in 2019. Indeed, it was with the visit of President Kenyatta that the idea of the African CARICOM Summit started with us, and we announced it hoping that it would have been in June 2020, when indeed I was chair of CARICOM, but COVID had other plans for us. And that June 2020 summit became September 2021 virtually. But the story of that summit tells us, and Ralph, you said it beautifully last night, that the shortest distance may be a straight line, but the life that we live has taught us that if we want to climb Soufriere, or I would say here in Barbados, Mount Hillaby, you can't always do that in a straight line. You have to zigzag. Well, it's 1,000 feet. And when I was at primary school, I was taught that anything over 1,000 feet is a mountain. So we clung on to that mountain jealously. But the point is this, that we will not always get there in a straight line. but that we keep our eyes focused and firm on the objective. The Africa CARICOM Summit, as I said, was in September of 2021. But in 2020, as we started to go through the horrors of COVID-19, one of the few bright lights was the Africa Medical Supplies Platform. And I like to remind people that we come from a country who does not forget who was there with us in our darkest hour. And ironically, our first engagement with the AFREXIMBANK came as a result of the Africa Medical Supplies Platform. Because as the rest of the world were seeking to impose export restrictions and to ensure that persons had to pay astronomical prices for goods that would otherwise be available at a fraction of the cost, Africa opened its doors to the Caribbean community and facilitated access to equipment, therapeutics, and ultimately vaccines, with the payment mechanism being through AFREXIMBANK. By 2021, Professor, you came and you met with Minister Strawn and myself and the then Governor of the Central Bank, and we recognized that this was a journey which was obligatory. That we have made as much progress in as short a period of time as we have, in less than 2 years, speaks not just to the passion, but as Ralph said just now, to also that the numbers and the opportunities can work for both of us. That this can be your platform for taking a far greater role in not just the Caribbean, but the Americas, must of necessity be part of the expansionary program that will see you move from 33 billion in assets to the 60 billion by 2030. Ralph has already told us about the possibilities of the Latin American Development Bank, CAF. I have already spoken also to the Inter-American Development Bank and the Caribbean Development Bank. But most importantly, the CARICOM Development Fund. Before we went to the 30th anniversary conference in Accra, Ghana, less than 2 months ago, the CARICOM Development Fund became a shareholder of AFREXIMBANK. I want to speak as the lead Prime Minister for CARICOM Single Market and Economy, because it is impossible for us to continue to navigate this road unless we ensure that the realities of forging a single market and a single economy are understood by all. And that is why Chapter 7 was settled in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, to be able to recognize that as we build out this structure in the single market and single economy, there will be winners and there will be losers. And that we need to be able to create a platform that allows disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged sectors, and disadvantaged regions to be able to find a pathway that does not allow them to be suffocated within the context of this new framework that we build for the benefit of all of our countries. The CARICOM Development Fund has therefore been that instrument that the heads of government determined should help play that role. Part of the difficulty has always been the extent to which it can receive appropriate funding, even from within the community itself. And we continue to believe that governments alone should be responsible for the funding of this institution, to be able to create that leveling playing field that, Ralph, you benefited from the construction of your new airport in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a result of the concessional funding available from the CDF. We recognize that with the way in which banking has developed in the last few decades, and I welcome the Chairman and CEO of Access Bank with us this afternoon too, Herbert Wigby, and I say to my brother, who is now a Caribbean man, that we will have some discussions with the CSME and the ACFT as well. But the point I'm making is that we have over $50 billion in private sector savings in the Caribbean community, earning 0.0001%. At a time when there is a lack of creative instruments and innovative instruments available on the market that could help fund regional development, while at the same time creating a better return on savings for the average Caribbean person. We have been too reticent and too laid back in the manner in which we have sought to employ capital in this region and to risk it. Not risk it loosely, not risk it wildly. But I have seen what has happened in Africa when the same traditional North Atlantic commercial banks retreated from the marketplace, and when indigenous African banks were allowed to step up to the plate and to make that defining difference in creating opportunities for Africans for Africa. I believe that the time has come in this region for us similarly to ensure that Caribbean people will have access to capital, to be able to build out our region and to be able to ensure that they can create the platforms for prosperity that will allow our people to benefit rather than to be seen as tenants in their own land and to be the pawns of others in the creation of wealth for others. It was against this backdrop that we welcomed, therefore, the opportunity to host last year the Africa and Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, the first step into the waters of creating the opportunities for African and Caribbean businessmen to be able to see what they can do together and with the assistance of each other. It is a good thing that the government of Guyana and President Ali has asked me to remind all of you that on the 30th and 31st of October, that he's expecting to see all of the rest of us in CARICOM in Georgetown to help welcome the second African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum there too. But both Ralph and Baba made the point that this bank is essentially for private sector persons. And where are the opportunities? The African Exim Bank had become renowned in Africa for being able to play that central role with the governments who established local content in those countries where energy abounded. And the ability to finance indigenous players without the unconscious bias that sometimes regrettably attends itself in colonial, I want to be decent, in countries that were former colonies, who continue to have a shadow of colonial practices informing all decision-making, both in the public and private sector, regrettably. When that happened, you needed a disruptive factor to intervene. And I'm told that the AFREXIMBANK Bank became that disruptive factor to ensure that a lot of indigenous Africans were able to play their role in building out the oil and gas and now renewable energy sector in the continent of Africa. I believe that there is need for a similar disruptive factor in the Caribbean. It always amazes me that for those countries who have tourism as its primary foreign exchange earner, that the attitude towards the provision of working capital and capital within the tourism sector is one that would suggest that they were not to be the beneficiaries of the expansive approaches of loans in the private sector from the commercial banks, but simply to be one in which those loans tended to consolidate ownership in the very spaces that they were. We have come to the point where we need to be able to ensure that as mature tourism destinations, that we do not lag behind in terms of ensuring access to our tourism sector, to renew our plans, because we are a mature tourism sector, and equally to provide the essential working capital that is necessary in order for hotels and other tourism establishments to be able to move forward. That this bank brings to the table the product of contours, which will allow not just those of us in Barbados, but across the rest of the region to benefit from access to capital in renewing our tourism sector, is a good thing. We heard as well of the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, and I will only remind us of the CARICOM Multilateral Clearing Facility, which existed, and I see the governor of the central bank here, who has agreed, along with the governor of the Bahamas Central Bank, to be able to anchor the piloting of a program that will allow for trade within the region and with Africa to be taken on the basis of settling the net differences rather than having to look for hard currency for every single transaction. I referred to the CARICOM Multilateral Clearing Facility only because had we had entities such as AFREXIMBANK at the time to underwrite that facility, it might not have become dormant 30 years ago. I thank you as well for recognizing that the opportunity to bring large players into the region, for us to have a renewed sense of purpose with respect to the development of our agricultural sectors and our energy sectors in particular. And why? Unless we move to scale in this Caribbean region, we are not going to be able to make a difference, regrettably. And part and parcel of why we have come together as a unit in the regional integration movement is to get that scale at the public sector level. But we need the scale equally at the private sector level if we are going to be able to compete successfully against those large companies that want to dwarf our agricultural production in this region. And there's absolutely no reason why we cannot work together to create those companies that will have shareholdings from across our different countries and different private sector elements to be able to have that level of competition. Professor Orama, you made the point at the opening of the Trade Expo last year that Africa imports a significant amount of fish every year. I believe the figure was $4.5 billion, but only 1% comes from the Caribbean region. And hence, the project which you described with respect to major fish farming in many Caribbean countries and being located ultimately through a central processing entity that can then export back to Africa will make a huge difference to Caribbean fishermen and to Caribbean investors who want to get involved in aquaculture and mariculture. The opportunity to finance our renewable energy projects, in particular when many of these projects have been the football of the international financial institutions, and I see both my sisters from Dominica and St. Kitts and Nevis nodding their heads, because they know the walk that they have had in trying to extract geothermal energy and to have it be a critical part of their economic platform to enhance the competitiveness of their countries and even to create export earnings through the export of energy as a result of those geothermal assets. The opportunity for you now to see real progress in less than a year after engagement with AFREXIMBANK is worthy of note for us. I have made these few points, and I could go on and on, to be able to show those of you here and those listening that this is not just a proud moment historically. And it is. But it is also a move that makes sense and will inure to the benefit of our regional private sector and our regional state-owned corporations who need access to a more empathetic, reasonable, and one willing to take risk, not foolish risks, not reckless risk, but risk that will allow our people to move and grow to the next level. And it is significant that that comes now from people from whom we have come. And this is what makes today even more special. Crop over is not just a carnival. We say it's more than a carnival. But for me, it is significant as Prime Minister of Barbados that this event happens between Emancipation Day and Kadooment Day. Because Kadooment Day is the culmination of the celebration of all that we have been and are about and have had to endure for centuries, because it was only at the end of the crop that our people got to celebrate, and hence this particular activity that reflects itself in the gaiety and festivities that you see us involved in at this point in time. Anchored by an Emancipation Day from 185 years ago when our people were released, that we can now move not just to be the victims or the audience, but now the shapers of our destiny, the firm craftsmen of our fate, is a matter which gives myself, my government, and all of us great, great satisfaction. We believe that what was a journey to barbarism has now been converted to a bridge to partnership and prosperity. I want to thank all who made today possible. Professor Rama, your team continues to be one that has worked seamlessly with our teams at Invest Barbados, not just for this event, but for the previous events that they've worked together. It is therefore not by accident that I now see that both of you share the same building, and I will only now start to look to see where the synergies and partnerships may come, even if not from the top, but from Trident House in Hastings. Secondly, I would like to thank the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank, because normally people would say that you all are reticent and laid back, but the passion with which both the Ministry and the Central Bank attached itself to this mission says to me that John Hearn's recognition of the Barbadian when he wrote in 1966, being the most creative expression to watch on this independence journey, was a true one. And that what I saw from you was not simply persons doing their job, but persons who understood the symbolic and historic role and mission that you were undertaking in making today's event possible. I also want to thank the Prime Minister's office, and to thank at a personal level, and you will forgive me, Africa must be not just in our hearts, but that is where it starts. And for me, I thank my family for giving me the opportunity of understanding why this was an important journey for all of us, and in particular my uncle Elombe, who is not with us, but who has been a leading Pan-Africanist in this Caribbean region. And I say so because, as you heard from President Obasanjo last night, that we need to ensure that our curricula across this region tells our stories in our idioms, in our language, in our way. Because if we don't, then we will keep singing the old lyrics to King Jaja, which Ambassador Comijong has assured me that he has now rewritten for all Barbadian school children to live and sing according to our understanding of the true history of King Jaja of Opobo. And I end with the lyrics, Philip, of the great Nobel laureate from St. Lucia, who, as he addressed that ceremony that bestowed that great commendation on him, wrote and delivered these words that I believe to be equally appropriate as we come to the end of our proceedings here. And I quote, "Break a vase, and the love that reassembles the fragments is stronger than the love which took its symmetry for granted when it was whole. The glue that fits the pieces is the sealing of its original shape. It is such a love that reassembles our African and Asiatic fragments, the cracked heirlooms whose restoration shows its white scars. This gathering of broken pieces is the care and pain of the Antilles. And if the pieces are disparate, ill-fitting, they contain more pain than their original sculpture. Those icons and sacred vessels taken for granted in their ancestral places. Antillean art is this restoration of our shattered histories, our shards of vocabulary, our archipelago becoming a synonym for pieces broken off from the original continent. Our Antillean development is the restoration of our shattered histories, our shards of vocabulary, our archipelago becoming a synonym for pieces broken off from our motherland, Africa. Let our people now not simply benefit from the restoration of the unity of purpose between the peoples of the Caribbean and the African continent, but let our people also understand that this must be the platform for prosperity and for partnership that will carry our people to even higher heights and better dividends than the world has allowed us to see for the last few centuries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Motley. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause, please. Prime Minister Motley mentioned crop over, and so did I at the beginning of the speech when I acknowledged that it's so important and it's not lost on any of us that this is happening during the season of emancipation, the 50th anniversary of CARICOM, and of course Barbados' Crop Over Festival, which is driven by fantastic music, even more so for 2023. Music is a big part of who we are in the Caribbean and in Africa. The sounds and rhythms provide unique insight into the cultures and subcultures of our regions. Today, we are joined by a beautiful sister from Cameroon, whose music is a blend of rhythm and blues and jazz and reggae with African melodies as its foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, when the music hits you and maybe you want to shake a leg a little bit because you've been sitting a lot this afternoon, feel free to do that. Put your hands together and welcome the beautiful Kaisa. Ladies and gentlemen, come and give her a round of applause. Kaisa. I am I'm hoping that she gets the opportunity to stay in Barbados and experience our festival. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, from Cameroon, Kaisa.
Excellency, Prime Ministers, I am a dedicated Pan-African. All right. I was saying I'm a dedicated Pan-African, and I really believe this is extraordinary what is happening today, and that we can only go forward by connecting and building bridges between Africa and its diaspora. Thank you. Tonje namabulano namasenga monyole. Hey hey Toweni namalano hey Boa minde nyemba nyongi. Hey oh sidimbe ya amunamboa Chenye senye longe ombo wango. Eva. Nama wasane mboa. Boa. Boa nyimba nyongi chita. Nama wasane mboa. Bunyote ye. Boa. Boa. Limboa bana ya benae, yembanyoki, boa, hey. Tuweni na malano eh, oh 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 yeah yeah. Heba, hey yeah. I just took you to Douala, Cameroon, but we're going to travel now in the diaspora. All right. How is everybody doing here? Hera. Jeoma bolane nombanika. Adi kamila mie. Unongo changa mena jeoma topono. Ebanjana lungeli bwaba. Osikeka ay 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 ay. Punya musawe di bomende po Nanginya chita Unyulanchi umadimane dimane no Mabula mongo me pobe Adi komye Hey Rakata 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 Bish Bish Rakata Rakata, rakata, bish, Rakata, 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 fish. Raka, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Osikeka, patalamboy. Banjana longa le moya. Osidimbe na punya bome le popuena. Osidimbe, Osidimbe, Osidimbe. Onongo janga menanje o matopomo. Osikeka punya musawedi polapa. Osidimbe na punya bome le popuena. Osidimbe. Osikeka bolalamba, pika patalamboy. Banjana longa le moya. Osidimbe na punya bome le popuina. Chita, chita, hey. Huma. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Osikeka bunya musawedi bomapo. Osidime la bunya bomede pobwela. Yeah. Hey. Bunya musawedi bopoitenge. Lo mande osawa nambale. Udino logica, lobamo, biolo comino e mayamasu, esimo e Africa Carib, Africa Carib, oh yeah, esimo e. Alea sonigando vino, lo mea son siki, siki vuela mola mienge, sa somo cadeni utomilo, I divateo matemelo calendera lugelo lo di bemunyenge, amuna okwasa, gando monte hielo con la de lunghi. Alia, sika, mosa mona, wale mona, yes. Ay, ahora tú me sé, yo soy mi ser, te la veo ese lo doy, esa más cosa, lo quieran todo lo de musiki. Yetena lo tondi, sangando, itetena, otu kwangana su, avikom keka, oh mwasa alea, 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 yeah, nah. qui chante même là. La musique là. Ça, elle s'appelle comment? Tournez-moi ça, tournez. Dansez-moi ça, dansez. Tournez-moi ça, tournez. Dansez-moi ça. Allez, sika, mosa mona, wale mona, sa, mutawedi eh? Aha. La Tony Sonica eh. La Tony Sonica eh. Allez, sika, mosa mona. Beaucoup moins sous. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, come on, one more time. Give it up for Kaisa. Thank you. Did you hear the reggae rhythms in there? Did you hear the tuk? Y'all didn't hear the tuk? Y'all felt it though. All right, so beautiful indeed. You know, Kaisa was born in Cameroon. She has lived in Paris. She's lived in New York. She loves to travel. I'm hoping that she stays for the next few days while we experience the last lap of crop over. And then maybe she can also call Barbados one of her favorite places. And maybe it will lead to a collaboration and a fusion, you know? Wonderful indeed. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge the talents of Kaisa. You will notice, ladies and gentlemen, that we are getting ready for a very important part of this evening's proceedings. Because in December 2022, AFREXIMBANK Board of Directors approved a US $1.5 million credit limit to support eligible CARICOM states. Oh, wait, sounds like I need to make a correction. Pardon me? Billy, ooh, let me do that again then. Pardon me. In December 2022, AFREXIMBANK's Board of Directors approved a US $1.5 billion credit limit to support eligible CARICOM states with a plan, that's a big difference, with a plan to double that figure soon. CARICOM member states that have signed the partnership agreement with AFREXIMBANK have access to the bank's financing instruments to support the various economic sectors, including renewable energy, tourism, agriculture, and, again, tourism. The bank has also pledged its support to assist small and medium-sized enterprises. Today, in addition to the opening of AFREXIM's CARICOM office, we will witness the signing of a number of agreements which will help to deepen ties between Africa and the Caribbean. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the history being witnessed here today? And now, ladies and gentlemen, we commence with the signing of the historic host country agreement. Signing the agreement will be Prime Minister Motley and President Orama. Please join me on stage. Yes, please. You may proceed with the signing of the host country agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, the signing of the historic country agreement, the host country agreement between Prime Minister Motley and President Orama. This evening, we will witness the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding between CARICOM Development Fund and AFREXIMBANK. The Memorandum of Understanding provides a broad framework for cooperation between both institutions in the delivery of service to CARICOM member states. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this milestone marks the joint efforts of the two organizations towards the implementation of activities aimed at expanding financial opportunities in the CARICOM and deepening cooperation between Africa and the Caribbean. As the Caribbean region seeks to forge closer economic integration within the framework of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME, AFREXIMBANK is partnering with the CDF to enhance the access to finance, technical assistance, and market intelligence information required to support export-oriented SMEs across CARICOM member states to take advantage of trade opportunities arising from the Africa-Caribbean Trade Initiative. Both institutions will also work together to explore optimal funding options from debt and equity capital markets, support the development of critical infrastructure projects in the CARICOM region. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let us warmly invite Mr. Rodinald Sumer, Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund, and Mrs. Kanayo Owani, Executive Vice President of Intra-African Trade Bank of AFREXIMBANK, to please sign the document. History is being made today, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Sumer and Executive Vice President Owani. The next agreement to be signed this evening is the framework pre-agreement between Invest Barbados, acting on behalf of the government of Barbados, and Evergreen Egypt United regarding the establishment of a US $70 million fully integrated aquaculture, fisheries, and marine services project to be executed here in Barbados. This collaboration is a key step towards strengthening South-South cooperation in the fields of aquaculture, fisheries, and marine services. The project will serve as a special economic zone that will include a fishing fleet, a shipyard, and logistical marine services, a fish meal production line, a fish processing factory, indoor shrimp farms, a hatchery, and seaweed products production lines. It would also include ice and foam factories, independent renewable power generation, as well as commercial retail and cultural facilities, including an under-ocean museum. The project would make it possible, yes, ladies and gentlemen, the project would make it possible for the government of Barbados to achieve its objective of advancing the country's blue economy and positioning the sector as a key economic pillar to serve the domestic and export markets. Excellencies, distinguished guests, delegates, at this fine occasion, we have signing Ms. Kay Ann Greenidge, CEO of Invest Barbados, and Mr. Moataz El Mokadam, CEO of Evergreen Egypt United. Thank you, Ms. Greenidge, and thank you as well, Mr. El Mokadam. Go ahead, sir.
What a moment, right? Really, I wanted just to express our deepest gratitude and a big thanks to the what I would likely call the enablers of this moment, really. I think it's a wonderful moment. I think it will really trigger a lot to come. The thanks, of course, to the enablers are, by all means, Her Excellency, the Honorable, of course, Prime Minister of Barbados. I think a very big thanks to you. Would like to call you the change agents of Barbados, and I think that's very important. And of course, all your wonderful team, very supportive team, Skay and Minister of Agriculture, and all the rest of the super team you have. Again, I definitely would like to thank a very, very big applaud and thank you to Professor Orama, to Ms. Kenayo, for the wonderful and the brilliant job they have been doing to support us and to support private investors from Africa. A big applaud, a big applaud. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share with you a few words on why we made that investment or why we're doing that investment. I think that's a very good vote of confidence for the Caribbean. The first reason is that because we're Africans. And I think that's a very, very key trigger for us. Number two, there's a golden opportunity and there are beautiful untapped opportunities and resources in the Caribbean and would love to be partner of success in those areas. The third, of course, is the support of the governments. And I think, as we said, being a change agent here and really working to support us, and the rhythm that we have seen is not only the support, but the rhythm of the support. And I think that's a key success factor to why we're making that decision. And of course, last but not least, by all means, the hand-holding and the significant support that we got from AFREXIMBANK. They took our hands, They geared us, they introduced the opportunities, and I would really thank you for all the support, and it's still to come, right? And I think those are the 4 main reasons why we're doing so. And I think this will provide a good confidence and a good, really, how can I say, a good signal to other investors to follow into the Caribbean. I finally would love, again, to repeat our thanks and appreciation to this. And I will leave you with one thought: believe, and most importantly, support and have faith in the system, and most of all, it will happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Ms. Greenidge and the representatives of Evergreen Egypt United. The next agreement to be signed is the Memorandum of Understanding between AFRECIMBANK Holdings Limited and Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business and Management for collaboration in the identification of trade opportunities between Africa and the Caribbean. We believe that the lack of information is among the key factors behind the low levels of trade between Africa and the Caribbean. Bridging of information gap thus constitutes an important component of any strategy aiming at boosting Afro-Caribbean trade and investments. Thus, we are honored today to witness the cooperation between Barbados' leading business school, Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business and Management, and the Mauritius-based company, AFRECIMBANK Holdings Limited, who are partnering today to explore various opportunities presented by the ties between Africa and the Caribbean in the areas of culture and business fusion through trade facilitation, tourism, music, and creatives. Under this MOU, the school will provide trade-related research and data, while AFRECIMBANK Holdings, through its 2 planned subsidiaries in Barbados, will originate and facilitate the utilization of data for trade transactions through a digital trade facilitation platform. I would now leave the floor for the representative of each party. Mr. Dion Greenidge, please join me, the Executive Director and CEO of Sagicor Cave Hill School of Business and Management, and Mr. Gabriel Edgel, the Chairman of Oakwood Green Africa, and Mr. Chris Oshiafi, the Chairman of Pan-African Capital Holdings, who will be signing on behalf of AFRECIMBANK Holdings Limited. Thank you to Mr. Greenidge, Mr. Edgell, and Mr. Oshiafi. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we of course need to commemorate today with the official photos. I noticed that Dr. Gonzalez is not with us at the moment. However, I invite the other heads of government to please come to the stage. And they will be joined by Professor Orama and President O. Basanjo. Thank you. Are we ready for, right, yes? Okay, so the heads, they will stay in place, and they will be joined by Dennis Denya, Kunayo Owani. Yes, please, if you can access the stage to my right. Wamkele Mene and Pamela Coke Hamilton, please. So Dennis Byron, can you please join us? Okay, and the next layer of photos, oh, you're not finished. We're not finished. We have lots of family photos to take. Just a moment, just bear with us. So, and also we now invite the representatives of all heads of government, please, to join this group. Everybody's here? Do we have everybody? All right. Okay, next, joining this group, we will have the directors of AFREXIMBANK. If any of the directors are not in this photo, please join the group. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and now we invite all staff of Invest Barbados and the rest of the staff members of AFREXIMBANK, please, for the final large photo. Staff of Invest Barbados and the staff of AFREXIMBANK. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I extend an invitation to the former President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron. Sir Dennis Byron, to join me on stage, ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up today's proceedings, to deliver the vote of thanks. May we please have Sir Dennis Byron. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge the presence of Sir Dennis Byron. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Your Excellency, Prime Minister of Barbados, other excellencies, esteemed brothers and sisters, or sisters and brothers. It's a unique privilege for me to be able to stand here as the representative of the cherished bond between the richness of Africa and the splendor of the Caribbean, a bond epitomized today by the formal launch of the AFREXIMBANK branch office for CARICOM here in Bridgetown, Barbados. From the elegant words of the bell holder, introducing the day, to the soulful and warm performance by Kaisa, a symbol of African and Caribbean unity, reminding us that music transcends boundaries, interspersed with the moving verses of the Bayesian poet, Akeem Chandler Prescott, who offered us a glimpse into the tapestry of our shared history and dreams. And the video, which reminded us of the journey of AFREXIMBANK to the Caribbean, and that it is not just a voyage across an ocean, but a convergence of shared aspirations. This evening, in the presence of such an esteemed gathering, we see the strength in diversity as we stand united in our collective quest for growth and prosperity. And this is emphasized by the very impressive description of the mission of AFREXIMBANK in the Caribbean, enunciated by Professor Benedict Arama, its president. And we also were treated to examples of Caribbean leadership by Prime Ministers Philip Pear and Lescott Mitchell, explaining the commitment of CARICOM to the AFREXIMBANK venture and the reasons and benefits for it. Then we heard and saw the advocacy of Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves as he explained the benefits and encouraged the private sector to take advantage of the opportunities that are now being presented. Of course, this gives me a chance to say that I like democracy, as I recognize Chief Obasanjo, whose wisdom was so vigorously demonstrated that he taught us that age is just a number. And then we had Prime Minister Mir as the lead Prime Minister for CARICOM, giving us an overview of the development of CARICOM as the 6th region of Africa, and painting a picture of the way in which working together can benefit us and Africa and repair the ills of the past as we build the strength of the future. Now, forgive me not remembering the names, but it was very impressive as I witnessed the signing arrangements to see that the vision, the intentions, and the aspirations have already been concretized by the signing of agreements. And so the work of the AFREXIMBANK in the Caribbean has commenced. So as we officially launch the AFREXIMBANK CARICOM office, we stand on the cusp of a transformative partnership. The AFREXIMBANK's collaboration with the nations of CARICOM community promises to be and to fuel sustainable growth and economic resilience in the Caribbean region and Africa. This venture is an amalgamation of shared values, ambitions, and a restatement of the power of collaboration. To organize and plan today's historic event took many hands. And for this, we want to say thank you to everyone who worked so tirelessly to make today such a tremendous success. Of course, I have to start by expressing appreciation to our esteemed Honorable Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, and Professor Benedict Orama, whose leadership and commitment were instrumental to this endeavor and transforming our shared dreams into tangible realities. There were so many other officials who have helped to drive the partnership between AFREXIMBANK and the Caribbean community. And specifically, the relevant CARICOM heads of government who signed the partnership agreement. This journey would not have been possible without the support of the African Union and all its organs, represented here today by Mr. Mene, the Secretary General of AFCTFA Secretariat, CARICOM Secretary General, Dr. Bennett, Barbados' Ambassador to CARICOM Community, His Excellency David Commission, and the OSS Director General, His Excellency Dr. Lidicus Jules, and the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Her Excellency Pamela Cook-Hamilton. We recognize and acknowledge the formidable contributions of the former General Counsel of CARICOM, Dr. Bab Schaefer, and the General Counsel of the OECS, Mr. Dwight Lane. Their meticulous work in conjunction with the Attorney Generals of the CARICOM region and the legal counsel at the bank shaped the partnership agreement, laying the cornerstone of this milestone partnership. We must also acknowledge the efforts of Ambassador of Egypt to Cuba and the Caribbean, His Excellency Mayor Al-Adawi, who was the Dean of African Ambassadors to Cuba when this journey commenced. In Barbados, we have to express appreciation to the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, the Tourism Department Incorporated, Export Barbados, the National Cultural Foundation for their invaluable contributions. The work of the Barbados Central Bank, which has been specifically mentioned for the payment platform, has also got to be specifically appreciated. The thanks must go to the staff of the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their indispensable support. And we also have to appreciate the Trident Financial Center for their substantial role in facilitating the initiative. We have all experienced the unwavering assistance of the Barbados Police Force, the Customs Department, Immigration Department, and the commendable services of the Grantley Adams International Airport in seamlessly connecting our continents and our connections here for this session. And we must say a special thank you to the various service providers who played instrumental roles behind the scenes, ensuring the success of this successive event. To the AFREXIMBANK team, the Chesapeake team, and every individual agency or organization that has ardently supported the mission of AFREXIMBANK, I express heartfelt gratitude. Your collective efforts have played a pivotal role in bringing this initiative to fruition. So as we look ahead towards a future of sustainability and collective action in overcoming global crises, in strengthening relationships between Africa and the Caribbean, let us draw inspiration from an African proverb which states, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And today we stand united in our commitment to go far together. So let me close by reiterating a general thanks to everyone who contributed. And I thank you all who are here today for your presence. And for those who are listening in, we also say thank you. As we bid adieu to this evening, I send forth the best of our wishes to AFREXIMBANK. Together, let us continue to strengthen our ties and work towards a world where all people, regardless of origin, can live in prosperity and peace.
Thank you, Sir Dennis. Oh, okay. It was a test. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've actually had prime ministers, one special request that came from AFREXIMBANK, and they would like to commemorate this historical moment with one final photo featuring the prime ministers and the investors and clients of the bank who are present here today, and then we can get to the fireworks. Okay. All right. right, so if we could have the prime ministers and the investors and clients who are present here today of AFREXIMBANK. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you all for participating in that photo. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the ceremony this evening. I join Sir Dennis in thanking you all for being in attendance and invite you to join us on the outside for cocktails. And of course, you need to remain seated and allow the dignitaries and heads of government to leave first. On the outside in the foyer, we have talented Barbadian artists and entertainment, so you can enjoy a little bit of our Crop Over Festival. There will be steel panists, Mark Ford, Bajan Tuk Band, Carl Smith and Friends, and the Mother Sally will be Ursal Faria. And now I think it's time for the fireworks as we announce that AFREXIMBANK is now officially a part of the Barbadian financial landscape, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, you can make more noise than that. Yes, it's a historical moment as AFREXIMBANK is now a part of our financial landscape. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If, ladies and gentlemen, respectfully, we ask that you please be seated for security reasons and allow the heads of government to leave the room first, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated for security reasons, which allows our security detail to follow protocol and allow the heads of government to first depart the room. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are awaiting the departure of the heads of government.